Hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about accessories. And in this case, it's going to be more than accessories, it's going to be cables. And all systems need cables. You need interconnect cables to hook them up, you need power cords to power them up. Every headphone has a cable on it, so we got a lot of cables. And if you look at the aftermarket for cables on headphones and electronics in general, it's pretty vast. There's a lot of things to choose from out there. JPS Labs, which is our parent company, started this company back in 1990, has been doing cables for over 30 years. And because I'm the guy that designs cables, I'm the designer. That's why you only see me here today, because the kids do headphones. So I'm going to talk about the whole wide world of cables and how it relates primarily to headphones. So I think everyone's familiar with cables on headphones. Like, for example, on our Diana or 1266, like Diana comes with a stock cable, which looks like this. And it's flexible, it's easy to use, and it serves its function. And it's a copper alloy-based cable, and that's a stock cable. Now, you can move up from that and actually improve on the ergonomics and the sound quality by going to an upgraded cable, such as our superconductor HP. And this gets you into a custom alloy wire that I developed decades ago called Alumaloy. And it's actually a blended conductor made of aluminum, pure aluminum, and copper, and some other elements in a specific blend and annealing points. And it actually sets up a particular sound quality. And I know a lot of guys who've played with cables before understand that, where you've got silvers, coppers, and there are very few companies that actually play with alloys like we do, but each one of them tends to have a bit different of a spectral balance to the overall sound. We use different conductors within a cable design. So years ago, I came up with our own conductor material called Alumaloy, and a majority of our cables, at least the interconnects and speaker cables, not really the power cords. Power cords, we stick more to a copper alloys. But most of the signal carrying cables are some version of our Alumaloy, whether it be stranded, solid core, different gauges, different flexibilities, different insulations, and so on. And a while back, I did a video, I think it's a 4-part series, 4 videos on cable design, how we got started, blah, blah, blah. So we'll refer that if you look down in the notes here, you'll see links to it. You can check it out. We'll put up a link to that series of videos if you're interested more about the cables and how we got into it and the different designs and how it changes things. So back to cables. So beyond stock power cords and interconnects and so on, and the stuff that they stick in the box that's worth $1 or so that allows you to use the gear, we take things to a much higher level at JPS Labs with the cable topologies and the material science. And typically what you'll get out of going to a higher end cable or power cord is greater clarity, more of a ability to hear the micro details, the small stuff that allows you to create images within your mind from the really tiny signals. And that's where we key in on. Like, most people don't think about it, but any conductor will carry a signal, and it will work. And what we're keying in on is the clarity to the source. Like, how well can you pick out the singer or the instrument or the decay of strings in like piano and guitar? Stuff like that really starts to pop when you get into the higher end cables, and vice versa. It tends to be more of a dullish sound and not as much information for your brain to recreate an image when you have just any old cable. So we key in on stuff like that. We were talking about improved imaging, improved clarity. You can actually make things sound boomier or bassier with certain cables, and vice versa. Some cables, like a silver conductor, tend to lean the sound out. They're not as good in the bottom end, so you hear, it brings the top end up, which a lot of people traditionally have preferred with like tube gear and stuff to extract more information or more higher frequency. And basically, you're playing around with spectral balance, so to speak. And again, the micro detail, how much information is getting to the speakers or the headphone. Anyway, on that note, we have, when you move up to something like superconductor HP on the, like on Diana, you get it's a handmade cable. So we have larger conductors in here than we would normally have in a stock cable. You move into our alloy wire, which is Alumaloy, which has a greater level of clarity and just sounds better in general than your typical coppers do. And by the only way to make a cable this supple and this flexible for a headphone is by hand. These cables are made to our spec. We spec the copper. We spec the insulation thickness on the copper. We spec the jacket material. We spec diameters. We spec thickness of these dielectrics, all this stuff to try to come up with, to come up with an actual cable. And then we terminate them here and put ends on it and make it into a finished product. So in that sense, though, that's more or less an extruded cable. It's made, they start with the conductor. They extrude an insulator over that. They cable it or twist it in some way. They put fillers, or if you need it in more or something in there, they fill out the inside of the cable so it's round. They put an overall jacket on there. They print our legends and our information on the cable for us. It's all made to a specification that I designed with this cable. So in that sense, it's a machine-made cable, though. The problem with that is it's limiting in its ability to make it feel a certain way. Like, it's difficult to get that right without making many, many iterations of the cables, which is expensive because you can't just make 10 feet of it and try it out. You're making tens of thousands of feet of this product, and it is what it is once it's made. Whereas when you make a handmade cable, we can tweak the design out on these things. So we can decide what type of insulation materials we want to use. The wire and the conductors themselves are in there. All right, they're made to be a certain way, a certain gauge for the application. In this case, a headphone cable. So in the case of the Dianas, I believe these are 22 gauge Alumaloy conductor we use in there. The superconductor HP on the 1266 is a much larger gauge. You're looking at, I believe this is a 16 gauge twisted pair times 2 for left-right. So there's actually 2 separate cables and one for left to right. And each one's got a large twisted pair. So the 1266 itself, because it's a heavier headphone, we're able to put a larger cable on it and get away without not really yanking it around much because the headphone has some heft to it. On a Diana, because it was designed to be thin and lightweight, we went to a much thinner design on the overall cable topology. But again, the only way to get a certain feel or softness to these cables would be to create it by hand, make multiple iterations to get it just right. And so, we'll spend weeks just perfecting this cable design to be made by hand. A procedure is created, and here we have it. So in any case, because we've been making cables for many, many years, and the few guys that we have working here have been with us for many, many years as well who make the cables, they're highly experienced in doing this. So, when you talk about just the way you solder a connector on, the way it's strain relief to these wires, how it holds up over time in the field and so on, it's important, So we spend a lot of time creating procedures. We know how cables can fail out in the field because we've been doing it for over 30 years. So when we design a cable product, it's designed to last a very long time. And because who the hell wants problems with your cables, right? So beyond the headphone cables, which most of the people who are familiar with Abyss know about our upgrade cables for that, JPS Labs also makes 4 different lines of RCA and XLR interconnect, speaker cables if you're running speakers, and I think we have at least 7 different power cords available, and each one's kind of suited for a little bit of a different application. So we could cover that really quickly. We start with our lowest cost line of interconnect called Ultra Conductor 2. And when you look at it, it's nice. I mean, we have our own custom connectors made for it. It's a gold-plated copper brass alloy. It's a twisted pair shielded conductor. It uses our Alumaloy conductor materials. This is actually a 16 gauge interconnect, so it's pretty hefty as interconnect cable goes. That's our lowest cost line. And this is something that if you play with Ultra Conductor 2, as a start, it gets you into the realm of custom conductors, custom insulations, and you'll realize pretty quickly when you hook this up, especially when you run our headphones, what a cable can do, or how it can change the sound. The next up from that would be our Superconductor V, which is a white jacketed cable. And basically, as you go up in our lines of cable, the designs get more complicated, the cost goes higher, and the reason the designs are more complicated is because we're trying to extract more and more information out of these higher-end cables and out of the system in general. So, when you look at something like Superconductor V, it's a quad, a four-conductor in a twist, so it's inherently better at noise rejection than a twisted pair would be. It's this cable, I believe, is this has got a single shield. It's a heavy braid shield, but it's pretty flexible. But again, it's made to be on the next level up in terms of clarity from the line below it. And then we move up from there. We go into what would be considered way up there in the audiophile circles. This is a higher end cable. It's probably, $1,500, $2,000 a pair or something like that in a nominal length. This is Superconductor 4. And this gets into a solid core conductor, a large 15 gauge solid core, which is big for interconnect, WBT, locking RCA connectors, beautiful connectors that are made in Germany. And again, there's a urethane jacket. It's a solid core, solid wires it uses, but it's pretty flexible for its size. Very tricked out. Thin insulations in here. We use this has a polyimide coating on the wires, which makes it very durable but thin. So there's a lot of conductor in here, but it's a thinner cable. And again, it sets up even a higher level of clarity to the source. And you get into our handmade stuff. All this other stuff is made to specifications by machine, and we terminate it. But then you get into our handmade stuff. This is Illuminata 2. And again, from the inside out, we start with the raw conductors. They're braided by hand to make, I believe this is a quad 15 gauge solid core. We do the shield. This is a heavy cable. This cable weighs at least 1 kilogram. It's filled with aluminum particles, which act as a very dense shield. And we reference ground on the input or the source side of the cable to the shield. And so this is like one of the heaviest shields on the planet. The shield is many millimeters thick, and it's an aluminum particle shield. This is something I created back in early 2000, 2001, 2002. So we still go with it today with this Illuminata 2. This is our finest interconnect cable. And again, it's handmade from the inside out because there's no way to make a machine process for a cable like this. So we do what we can, and beautiful connectors, custom connectors. They're a rhodium-plated connector with a copper alloy. So we have everything's made by hand with this cable. And honestly speaking, it takes our Mr. Illuminata, who Jerry makes these cables. It takes about a day to make a pair of these by hand from the inside out. So it's crazy, but it is what it is to make something at this caliber, this level. Into power cords. A lot of people use power cords are really easy. Let's start from the beginning. Power cords are really easy things to play with in terms of tweaking a system. I would suggest the place to start would be an amplifier. If you really want to see what a power cord could do, start at the end of this chain, the amplifier. So with speakers, that would be the speaker amp. With headphones, it'd be whatever box contains the amplifier section if it's one piece, or if you have separates, then by all means put it on the headphone amplifier. And it's an easy tweak to play with power cords to tailor the sound to your liking on the gear. JPS Labs, we're after ultimate clarity without brightness, so you'll find that our products don't really try to shift tonality much. They more or less try to bring clarity out and improve the sound character that already exists within each piece. So where other cables, you can use them as a bit of tone control and mess with it that way, which is great too. So it just depends what you're after. But you look at something like this. This is called Captivator Lite. Again, very unique power cord that I designed years ago. The original Captivator was one of our early cords. It came out in 1999. It's still a product today. This is an 8-gauge copper alloy power cord that uses Kapton as an insulator, which is very unique. No one really does this anymore. It's very difficult to do. It's an expensive way to insulate a wire. But yeah, we've been doing this since 1999, this power cord, and it's still popular today. And what we did is scale down that 8-gauge to this Captivator Lite, which is a 12-gauge version of that. And it's cool. It's a urethane jacket. It doesn't carry vibrations, and it deadens vibration. So more people are in two-channel world with speakers are more concerned with that, particularly if you're running this into like a phono stage or a turntable or something, where if the cable's picking up a vibration and it's shaking the turntable or shaking whatever, then it's obviously you've got some sort of acoustic feedback path that you don't necessarily want. So a lot of people use things like all kinds of stuff to stop cables from carrying vibration to the gear. Well, we've built it into this cord itself. This cord was designed to not carry vibration. If you tap on one end, it doesn't get to the other end, which is pretty cool. But more importantly, the conductors are all tricked out. It's a really nice copper alloy conductors in here with a tight twist. Then this Kapton is actually a wrapped on and sintered insulation. Very expensive to do. Majority of these products are made in USA. I can't say all of them. I know we've got some optical cables we don't make and stuff like that, but for the most part, our cables are made here in the States, which is pretty cool. But yeah, something like this Captivator Lite, for example, we're talking about a cord like that. It's designed to be not over the top in terms of pushing resolution out of a piece, but have really nice additional clarity to sound. It's very universal. We've used these on DACs. We use them on amps. We use it on all kinds of stuff. So it's a 12 gauge, so it'll handle bigger gear, more powerful gear, tube amps. But it also has enough delicacy to sound and the way it deals with sonic character and harmonic structure that it works really well on source level gear like preamps and DACs and stuff. So it's a really cool cord. It's one of our go-to power cords when we're talking about trying to bring more information out of a good piece of gear. And, I should bring that up too. We're not talking about necessarily using these on, some $200 piece or something. A majority of customers that are running cables like this, these cables are expensive. And a majority of people who are running cables like this have invested tens of thousands of dollars in the gear. They can afford the gear. They can afford the better cables, and they use them to tweak the gear. And that's something else I should talk about too, is that's what we're doing here, is that, a lot of money could be saved if you work around the existing gear you have and try to tweak it out with power cords and interconnect. And it's not to say this stuff is inexpensive or cheap. It's not. But good gear isn't either nowadays. You get in some of the really well-made designed tube amps, the more basic an amp is, you do a single-ended trio design or something like that, the more it can be affected by power cords and the way the power delivery is to it, to a dramatic way. You can really screw up a good amp too, having the wrong cable on it within a system. So it's something, like I said, if you want to play with power cords, I suggest to start at the amp end. When you get that right, just keep in mind that as you change cables and power cords on an amp, it's also allowing you to hear things upstream. It allows you to better hear the gear prior to the amp, whatever your source is, the interconnects connecting the source. So you got to watch what you blame if you don't like the way something sounds, because a lot of times when you place better cabling within a system, it flushes out the stuff that isn't so good. And it unfortunately means you've got to pretty much do the entire system with better cables and power cords. That is what it is. It's no different than walking through 2 or 3 different sets of multi-$1,000 tubes to get the sound you want to. So it's the same kind of concept, just with cables. And power cords are, again, I'll point to them because they're the easiest thing to play with. It's pretty easy to just shut the piece off, plug a different cord in, turn it on, see where you stand. So, comparing things is pretty easy. So, But beyond that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, what we do here. JPS Labs has been around forever. We have thousands and thousands of audiophiles in the 2-channel realm who know all about this stuff. And there's a lot of brands of cables out there to choose from. So we've been doing this a long time. It's something to try. Most of these cables are available from the Abyss website. jpslabs.com is a separate website. That's just cables. So you can go and check them out there too. So that's about it. You got any questions? I'm Joe. You can call me. You can email us. I'm usually the guy that's going to answer that about cables particularly. So, if you want to talk about what you're currently using, what your system's composed of, give me a call or send us an email and just throw us, what do you have? Let me know what you have, and I'll let you know from all this what fits it. And we'll go from there. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Take care.